You might think you've decluttered your entire physical space, but what other things in your life are holding you back that aren't necessarily things? Hello, you guys, and welcome to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and in today's video, we'll be addressing 8 different things that aren't actual physical things in our space, but that still might be beneficial to declutter and remove from our lives. Some of these might be habits of ours, some of them might be beliefs that we have, or even personality characteristics that we've practiced, but I think all of them are definitely things that we can adjust and modify and reduce or remove from our lives to improve our life. Let's begin. The first one to address here is excuses. Let's get rid of excuses from our lives. Excuses are kind of an interesting topic because we definitely might feel compelled to make excuses when things don't go our way and we feel badly about it, but excuses really help no one. A lot of time we might make excuses about things that aren't really in our control, which obviously those are frustrating. But a lot of times I find too that even though we might make an excuse about why something didn't happen, there's a deeper root issue that we have to address. And it might be that our priorities are just organized differently, so we're not able to accomplish something. Now, I'm not one to make excuses much anymore, but in the past when I did, I might say, oh, well, I was too busy to get that done. That's why it didn't happen. But in reality, every choice that I make in life and every way I choose to allocate my time and energy, that's intentional. And so even if it doesn't feel like it's really a choice, it is. And if I'm not able to do something, chances are I did not prioritize that. And that's okay. It's okay to say, you know what? The way my schedule worked out, I chose not to prioritize that this time, and that's why it didn't get done. And I make plenty of mistakes in my everyday life, in business, in teaching, and you know what? It's life. I'm very happy to hold myself accountable when something doesn't happen and not blame something else. I think also if we can remove the habit of blaming someone else or something else for our own shortcomings, it gives you a new sense of power because you're not saying, oh, it's because of them that I couldn't do it, or it's because of this situation that I couldn't do it. It empowers us when we're able to say, you know what, it didn't happen and it's my own fault. I didn't do it. I didn't prioritize it, but you're able to move on and really take that responsibility. And I hope that you'll find, no matter what your situation is, if we can hold ourselves accountable and stop making those excuses, I think you'll ultimately feel better. The next thing that's not really a physical thing that'd be great to declutter from your life are making comparisons. When we compare ourselves to others, it can lead to some really unhealthy thoughts. An obvious example would be social media. I think there's unfortunately a lot of us who might wish that we looked like a certain person or ate like a certain person or lived like a certain person, and the reality is we don't. Our lives all look very different from one another, and maybe it doesn't stack up to what we believe. Likewise, we might compare ourselves to others that we work with, others in our families, other friends that we have, and think, am I behind? Life's not a race, and also everyone has so many different destinations that they'd like to go. Whether that's physical destinations, like moving somewhere or traveling somewhere, but also just what your path looks like. I know one aspect of life that I needed to stop making comparisons about had to do with age. I am 27, but in general I know I'm pretty young, and there were a lot of people who were older than me, both in teaching, for instance, as well as just in the entrepreneur space, in the minimalism space, who have an advantage of several years on me. I could feel kind of bummed out, like, man, I wish I was able to be where they are, and compare myself, feel badly, but I always have to come back to, I'm young. I haven't been doing this for that long. This is, an early part of my journey, and be appreciative of that. There might be individuals who seem very successful, but I also have to stop and realize, well, what were the trade-offs there? Everything has a price. I feel very lucky that I have an amazing relationship in my life with Jake, and I wouldn't give that up for anything, even if maybe had I been on my own or spending less time with Jake, that maybe I could be further in a career path or further in the entrepreneur world. That could be, but it's not a trade-off I'm willing to make. Rather than focus on where you're at in comparison to others, really align with your own values. Where are you currently at in your path of life, in your goals for your life? Are you on the right track for yourself, not for these other metrics or what other people want? If you can be in your own path and happy with where you're going, that's what matters. Likewise, it's also important to try to enjoy the journey rather than just seeking the destination, because it's all about the journey. Oftentimes when people achieve a big goal, they're kind of like, is that it? I mean, it's pretty cool and exciting when you achieve a goal, but sometimes it doesn't always feel as meaningful as we think it's going to feel. And that's where it's important to really enjoy that process along the way so it actually means something. If you find yourself comparing yourself to others, remember how everyone is on their own path and everyone's choosing different things. And sometimes too, people might project the idea that their life is going better than it actually is, whether that's on social media or even in person. Sometimes you don't realize the truth or the pain that they're experiencing, and therefore you can't actually compare because you only are comparing the highlight reel. This one's a little bit less deep than the other ones, but an important financial decision. And I suppose it could be things depending on what it is. But if you've got any subscription services that you are not using that are repeatedly taking a certain amount of money from you, are you getting the maximum value out of those monthly subscriptions? Take a look at your checking account, credit card, wherever you're having these transactions, and decide, are these actually worth it? When we really look at monthly expenses, these can add up so quickly. And I don't know about you, but there have been times in the past where I had a monthly account that I was not using much, or definitely not getting my money's worth. So take a look at your balance, your statements, and see if there's any of those that you could cut that are not being used fully. Number 4, we have talked about on the channel in the past, saying yes when you want to say no. Let's stop doing that. We live in a fast-paced world, and it's very easy for a lot of people to want many things of us. It could be work responsibilities, it could be family obligations, or hanging out with friends, or other things that you feel like you should do. However, you don't have to do any of these things. While obviously there might be certain events or gatherings or tasks that feel like you don't have much of a choice, when we start to reflect about these in more depth, I'm sure you will realize that a lot of them you don't actually have to say yes to. You have to think about your own well-being, and every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. So if you say yes to that gathering, and you might just think, oh, well, I'll just say yes, so what? You're saying no to that other time you could have spent doing something more meaningful to you. If you can try to be firm with your own time and value and respect your time and energy and say no to the things that you don't really want to do, I think will ultimately help you be a lot happier. We don't have to be afraid that we're missing out. We don't have to feel worried about upsetting people. In life, we're going to upset people and we're going to miss out on most things just by default of there's always so much happening and we're only focused on, our own bubble of everyday life. So really focus on what actually matters to you. The next thing to declutter that's not actual physical items are notifications. What current notifications are you receiving on your electronic devices? Now, personally, I have all notifications for everything turned off with the exception of text messages and calls. Those obviously notify me. And I don't really use my phone a whole lot, but every time we receive a notification, it could disrupt what we're working on, what we're doing, the peace of mind we're having. And really, if we can limit those distractions, it can allow us to be a lot more in the present moment. Of course, be choosy. You can decide what is most important that you'd like to have a notification for. But a lot of times we might have notifications set up that we don't even want or don't even like, but it's just habit. You can go into the settings of whatever electronic device and decide which notifications you'd like to disable. And with notifications, you'll notice that my message has been very consistent. In 250 videos here on YouTube, I have never actually once told you to hit the notifications. And of course, if you enjoy the notifications, then you do you, but it's definitely not something that I'm encouraging you to do to add that extra distraction in your life. I also like to think that for whatever matters to you, you'll make the time to look for that, whether you have a notification or not. So that can definitely be something that can allow us to be more in the present moment and spend less attention on whatever devices that you're using. Another thing to declutter are time wasters. Now, this is going to obviously depend on the person, but if there are certain pacifiers in your life, whether it's activities, or I suppose it could also be physical stuff that is slowing you down and wasting your time that you can't use to actually do meaningful tasks to you, then perhaps that could be reduced. Now, I think for some, watching TV or YouTube could be an area where that is a challenge. Again, it all goes back to intention. If it brings you joy and it's a very intentional thing you're doing, then awesome, you're doing great. But if it is something that feels a bit mindless to you and that you don't really have a lot of intention of, Perhaps it doesn't need to be in your life, or perhaps you can reduce the amount of time you spend doing that. Even if it's just, 15 minutes here and there that you're reducing from that activity, that could actually add up quite a bit in the long run and give you these pockets of time you didn't realize you had, as well as energy too, because sometimes these time waster activities make us feel a bit more drained as well, not just wasting time, but wasting our energy. Number 7 is for those tasks that you have been putting off for a long time. In some of these cases, it might just be time to move on and let them go. This could play into fantasy self. Perhaps there's a certain project we want to accomplish because of our fantasy self. We think that the ideal version of ourself might do that, but in reality, are we doing it? How long have you been waiting with this unfinished project? You can ask yourself if it's something you actually have to do, and if not, is there a reason or purpose to do it? Maybe the task seems worse than it actually is. Have you ever felt like a certain situation was more scary, fearful, difficult, and then once you actually started doing it, you realized it wasn't that bad? If the task is essential, see if there's at least one small action step you can take to be able to accomplish that. And at the very least, if you give yourself the forgiveness to say, you know what, I'm just not going to accomplish this, and you let it go, you move on, you stop feeling guilty about it, that is really going to enrich your life. The last thing here is excessive nostalgia. Now, I definitely love a good old walk down memory lane here and there, but when we are dwelling in the past a lot more than the present or future, I think that can be problematic. One of my favorite quotes, although I can't say the actual quote because of some foul language, came from business leader Gary Vaynerchuk, and it was a tweet essentially, and he talked about how, and again, I'm paraphrasing because of the language thing, but he said that looking backwards messes with your neck. And I thought that was so genius because obviously if you're spending too much time looking backwards, it does start to hurt your neck after a while, meaning that we're not really intended to live that way. The point of life is to not spend our time dwelling in the past because it's over. We can't change it. It happened the way it happened. And really where we should be spending our time is looking ahead, forward at the next thing or where we're at, embracing our current situation and surroundings. And so if we're excessively nostalgic and living in the past, you're likely missing out on a lot of the beauty that life has to offer, as well as it's preventing you from making the best decisions and actions that are going to actually help you in the future and create that future that you want. Whether you're looking back at a certain time in your life, a past relationship, a certain job, a certain financial situation, whatever it is, and you are longing for that time period, try to see if there's a root cause that might help you stop dwelling on that and focus more on the future. Even though we might have had some beautiful days in the past, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have those wonderful days in the future. Of course, this is easier said than done, but if you catch yourself thinking more about the past and dwelling, maybe there's another activity you can do instead that can shift your focus from the past into something from the present. I hope you guys found this video helpful when we look at decluttering non-physical things, and I've got a couple videos you also might enjoy that are of similar topics. And lastly, if you guys haven't already subscribed to the channel, you can do so right up here. We'd love to have you here at Abundantly Minimal. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.